The Fat Controller, or Sir Topham Hatt, is one of the key components on the North Western Railway. He's the controller of all the engines owned by the railway and always welcomes visitors when they come to the railway. In the North Western Railway's books, there are a total of 3 Fat Controllers on record, so let's take a look at all 3 in the order that they came into the railway business. The first controller, named Sir Topham Hatt, was the controller of Sodor till 1954. This would mean he was the controller from the books The 3 Railway Engines to The 4 Little Engines. He started his career in the business at Swindon Works when he was 14 years old. At Swindon Works, he struck a friendship with William Stanier. He came to Sodor at 1901, where he worked at A.W. Dry & Co. at Tidmouth. On the company's recommendation, he became a successful engineer, where he worked for the Tidmouth, Knapford, and Elsbridge Railway in 1909. This is where the coffee pot engines worked, which was the total of 4 engines worked for the railway. He also worked for the Tidmouth, Wellsworth, and Sudbury Railway in 1912, which was the home of 4 unknown tank engines, and the North Western Railway, which started its formation in 1914. Once employed by the North Western Railway, he rose to general manager in 1923. During his time, the first year of the North Western Railway was very rocky, where he had to try and take anything to keep the railway going. He even kept the unofficial Gresley White Elephant that he got instead of what he originally wanted, which was an Atlantic. A great majority of the North Western Railway's success was all on his enterprise and the resources to make the railway run at any cost. He was very dedicated to helping Henry get better and help the Big Green engine get through his illness. He treated the engines that had good intentions with respect and punished the troublesome engines when they were being naughty. A good example of this is 98462 and 87546, which he sent them away because of their behavior, and when the big engines went on strike, he kept them in the shed while promoting Thomas and Edward to the express service, while a small green engine named Percy took over the branch line that was previously ran by Thomas. He also purchased a J70 tram whose railway was closed in East Anglia. After the story Down the Mine, the Queen made a visit to Sodor, and Sir Topham Hatt had the pleasure of welcoming her to Sodor in 1953. He also welcomed her at the big station and even showed her all 7 engines at Tidmouth. Sir Topham Hatt was married to a woman named Jane in 1910. They had 2 children together, Barbara James and Charles Topham Hatt, who was born in 1914. Sir Topham Hatt retired in 1954 and gave his position of the railway to his son Charles. 2 years later, he passed away at Wellsworth in 1956. Charles Topham Hatt was the controller of the NWR from the book Percy the Small Engine to Great Little Engines. He attended Abbey School Cronk. Afterwards, he then went to Crewe, which was owned by the LMS, where he worked as an engineer pupil under William Stanier's leadership. He was working for Crewe when Henry came for his new shape after his accident in the story, The Flying Kipper. After working for Crewe, Stanier recommended him to a job for a railway service overseas in 1937. But 2 years later, he returned in 1939. 2 years later, he was married to a woman named Amanda, and they had 2 kids named Stephen Topham, born in 1941, and Bridget Amanda, born in 1943. After being discharged in 1945, Charles decided to spend another time period overseas and returned in 1952, and became mechanic engineer at Crovansgate Works as an assistant to his father. Charles began to make improvements to the Knapford Harbor in 1955, and even reopened a branch line at Alsburg, also known as the Little Western. With the construction of the Little Western, he also opened another railway called the Arsdale Railway. In his time, he also organized many important events, such as the 8 famous engines going to London, the visit from Stepney from the Bluebell Railway, the construction of the Coldy Fell Railway, and also saved the 14XX named Oliver from the other railway. In 1984, he then retired, and Stephen took his place as owner of the North Western Railway. Stephen Topham Hatt is the current controller of Sodor, who led the NWR from the book More About Thomas the Tank Engine to the very last book, Thomas and His Friends. While he didn't have as much of an impact of the railway as Sir Charles, he still handled the railway with care and passion. He brought the Inner City 125 known as Pip and Emma to help with the express work, sent Thomas to York, and even brought in a saddle tank engine named Wilbert. Stephen had 3 kids named Richard, Charles, and Emily. After that, there's not much else to Stephen's history besides the beginning of the 4th controller, which I would like to talk about today. Looking at all 3 controllers, what do they have in common? Well, they all had an enormous passion for the Northwestern Railway. Especially the first controller, who turned what little he had into something more. Instead of scrapping Henry after his accident, he sent him away to crew and gave him a better shape and didn't need assistance from something like Welsh coal. On top of that, it's pretty clear that he liked to experiment with what he had, and instead of scrapping his engines, he turned them into really useful engines. Look at his first 6 engines. They're all experiments. Also, where did Charles go when he was overseas? As stated, he went overseas for work, but there's no documents telling us where he went. Could he have went to America? Or do you think he went to another country? All 3 had a passion for steam engines. One more thing I would like to talk about is the 4th controller of the Northwestern Railway. Stephen had 3 kids, Richard, Charles, and Emily. Who do you think could be the leader of the railway after Stephen? No matter what, the history and success of Sodor is to thank to a leader who has great care into the people and engines.